I was sitting alone in Dr. Callum Reeves' examination room when I noticed the sticky note pressed to the corner of his leather desk planner. 4 words written in a physician's deliberately compressed scrawl. Except these were clear enough. Diana's husband. Too careful. My wife's name is Diana. My appointment was booked for 2 o'clock. I had arrived 5 minutes early, as I always do. The receptionist had shown me into the examination room with a bright, practiced smile, said the doctor would be with me shortly, and pulled the door closed behind her. The room was the kind of quiet that only expensive clinics in West Vancouver can produce. The hush of triple-glazed windows and thick carpeting, the faint mechanical breath of an air filtration system. I sat in the patient's chair and looked around the way a man who spent 30 years assessing construction sites looks around any new space, noting exits, structure, what belongs and what doesn't. The sticky note didn't belong. I leaned forward, studying it without touching it. The handwriting was urgent, compressed. Not a patient's name, not a file number, a relationship. As if Dr. Reeves needed to remind himself that the man coming through the door was not just another arrhythmia case, but something more complicated, something that required caution. Before I tell you what I did next, let me say a few words about myself, because they matter. My name is Graham Baines. I am 67 years old. I built Baines Timber and Land Holdings from a single lumber contract in the Cariboo in 1987, when I was 28 and had nothing but a half-decent relationship with a mill foreman and a willingness to outwork every other contractor in central British Columbia. That company is now worth $42 million. It did not get there because I am a particularly clever man, though I have my moments. It got there because I have spent 4 decades reading rooms, reading people, reading the precise gap between what someone says and what their hands are doing when they say it. My wife Diana is my second wife. We have been married for 7 years. She is 45, elegant, speaks 3 languages. She arrived at exactly the right moment, 2 years after my first wife passed from a stroke, when I was 60 and lonely in the way that successful men sometimes become. I told myself her timing meant something. The arrhythmia started last autumn. Irregular heartbeats, nothing alarming, the kind of thing a man my age is supposed to monitor rather than panic about. My own physician referred me to a specialist. My wife said she had heard excellent things about Dr. Callum Reeves. Prominent practice, reputation for precision, popular with the Shaughnessy crowd. She offered to book the appointment herself. I let her. The door opened and Dr. Reeves walked in. He was 48 or so, lean, with the kind of square jaw that reads as trustworthy on television. He extended his hand with the practiced warmth of a man who charges $400 for a consultation and wants you to feel the friendship is complimentary. "Mr. Baines," he said, "good to finally meet you. Sorry to keep you waiting." "Not at all," I said. I shook his hand and watched his eyes slide briefly, very briefly, to the corner of his desk planner. He noticed the note. A small thing happened in the muscles around his mouth, a micro-contraction, half a second. The way a person looks when they realize they've left something visible that should have been put away. He moved his arm slightly as he sat down, resting it so his sleeve covered the note. "Too late." I smiled pleasantly. "My wife speaks very highly of you," I said. "Yes, she's very kind." He cleared his throat and opened my file. "She gave me quite a detailed picture of your history when she called ahead. Very thorough." "She is," I agreed. He reviewed my ECG results and explained, in calm professional language, that my arrhythmia was entirely manageable. Then he reached into his drawer, produced a prescription slip, wrote quickly, and slid it across the desk. "Once daily with food," he said. "You may feel slightly fatigued the first week as your body adjusts. Completely normal." I looked at the prescription. I looked at his face. "Thank you, doctor," I said. "I'll have this filled today." I folded it carefully, tucked it into the inside pocket of my jacket, and walked out into the November rain of West Vancouver, feeling something I had not felt since a business partner tried to defraud me in 1999. The particular cold of knowing you are in danger and being the only one who knows it. I did not go to a pharmacy. I drove directly to my golf club in Dunbar and sat in the members' lounge until my old friend Roger, a retired internist, a man I have trusted with my actual health for 15 years, finished his afternoon round. I spread the prescription on the table between us. Roger looked at it. He looked at my cardiac history on his phone. The silence that followed was not comfortable. "Graham," he said finally, "this dosage combined with your specific type of arrhythmia would not stabilize your heart. It would stress it. Progressively over 2 or 3 weeks of daily use." He paused. "Have you taken any yet?" "No," I said. He nodded slowly. "Good." I drove home, walked through the front door of our house in West Vancouver. The house I built, the house with the view of the inlet my wife had redecorated 3 times in 7 years. and I greeted her with the quiet warmth of a man who'd received encouraging news from his new doctor. I held up a pharmacy bag I had stopped to fill on the way home, my actual heart medication repackaged into an appropriate bottle, and I let her watch me take one with a glass of water. Her shoulders dropped half an inch. The relief on her face was the most honest thing I had seen from her in a long time. It was not relief for me. I understood that now. Over the following week, I worked quietly and methodically, the way I have worked since I was 28, with nothing but a lumber contract and a handshake. I contacted a private firm in Burnaby that handles forensic financial investigations, the kind of firm that mines numbered company registrations, beneficial ownership records, and CRA filings without leaving a footprint. I gave them 6 months of our joint account statements and asked them to look for patterns. They found them. 47 wire transfers, ranging from $4,000 to $18,000 each, totaling just over $380,000, routed through a numbered BC company, registered 9 months ago. The company's sole director, once you traced through 2 layers of nominees, was Dr. Callum Reeves. My wife had been paying him, through a structure designed to be invisible. I allowed myself one evening with that information. A glass of scotch by the window, watching the lights on the North Shore come on one by one across the inlet, letting the full weight of it arrive. Then I put the glass down and started making calls. The second call was to my attorney, Bernard Ossie, who has been protecting my interests for 19 years and who does not alarm easily. By the time I finished, he was quiet in the way that careful men are quiet when they are already working the problem. The third call was to my son. Gavin is 37. He came into the company's legal affairs 3 years ago, at my invitation, because I believed in keeping family close to the business. His mother, my first wife, would have been proud of him, or so I had believed. Gavin did not answer, but that evening while I was in my study, my wife made a call. The recording system Bernard's security consultant had installed captured it clearly. He took it to Roger, she said. Her voice flattened into something I didn't recognize, not the voice she used with me, but the voice underneath it. He didn't fill the prescription at Shoppers, I checked. The response was my son. How long does that change the timeline? He asked. I don't know yet, but Gavin, you need to hold your people off for another few weeks. I can't hold them forever. You won't have to, but if you rush this, everything falls apart. The estate has to transfer cleanly. If there's any investigation, there won't be. There won't be if you let me handle it. I sat in my study for a long time after that recording ended. The grief I felt for my son was genuine, and it was brief because I couldn't afford to let it be anything else. Gavin had debts, in a general way, the way fathers know things they don't press on. Sports betting had become legal in Ontario 2 years prior, and he had treated it the way some men treat a second salary that might arrive any day now. His creditors had apparently grown impatient. He had decided that his father's death, accelerated by a cooperative cardiologist, managed by a calculating stepmother, was the most efficient solution available. I called Bernard again that night. What followed was 3 weeks of patience so precise it was almost meditative. I continued to perform my decline. I allowed my hands a slight tremor at breakfast. I took my actual medication faithfully, kept my heart stable, and watched my wife monitor my deterioration with the attentiveness of someone watching the progress of a slow project. My security consultant, meanwhile, captured something remarkable. A call between my wife and Dr. Reeves in which she described, calmly and with legal precision, her plan to report him to the BC College of Physicians and Surgeons once I was gone. She had kept his original prescription pad pages. She had kept their encrypted messages. She intended to present herself to the college as a grieving widow who had uncovered evidence of catastrophic malpractice. Dr. Reeves would lose his license, possibly face criminal charges. My wife would be a sympathetic witness rather than a conspirator. She had never intended to be with him. He was a means to an end, and the end was $42 million. I arranged a dinner. I framed it as an anniversary celebration, 7 years. I told my wife I wanted our son present. She hesitated a fraction of a second, then agreed. I told her I had also invited Dr. Reeves to thank him personally for his care, because I wanted everyone who had shaped the last chapter of my life to be present for what might be my final major gathering. Her face was extraordinary in that moment. A woman trying to calculate 3 things at once while appearing to be moved. That's so like you, she said softly. It is, I agreed. The dinner was on a Saturday in December. The house smelled of cedar. Bernard arrived 2 hours early and spent that time in my study. By 7 o'clock, an RCMP Commercial Crime Section team and a BC Securities Commission officer were positioned in an unmarked vehicle on the street, warrants already signed. My son arrived first. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in several nights, which I suspected was accurate. His handshake was damp. He tried to meet my eyes and couldn't quite manage it. Dr. Reeves arrived next, in a good blazer, carrying a bottle of Okanagan Red. He presented it to my wife with a warmth he tried to dampen in front of me and couldn't entirely suppress. I thanked him for coming. I told him his care had meant the world. We sat to dinner. I had ordered from a restaurant my wife loved in Yaletown. I let it go for an hour. I let them eat and drink and exist in the false safety they had constructed. I watched my son cut his lamb and refill his glass with the mechanical movements of a man performing normalcy under significant pressure. I watched my wife laugh at something the doctor said, then remember, a half-second late, that she was supposed to be laughing at me. Then I set down my fork, straightened in my chair, and stood up. The tremor in my hands was gone. My shoulders were level. I reached down beside my chair and lifted a leather portfolio onto the table. "I'd like to say a few words," I said. I opened the portfolio and placed the financial investigation report on the table. $380,000, 47 transfers, 1 numbered BC company, 1 sole director. I slid it toward the doctor and watched his face lose its color in real time, like dye being rinsed out of fabric. "You've been receiving payments from my wife for 9 months," I said. "The BC Securities Commission has a copy of this, so does the RCMP. I pressed play on the phone I had placed face down beside my water glass. The dining room filled with my wife's voice, calm and precise, speaking to her attorney. "I have the prescription pad pages. I have the messages. Once Graham is gone, I go to the college and I go to the Crown's office. Callum takes the fall. I walk away clean." The sound that came out of the doctor then was not something I had heard from a man before. He turned to my wife with an expression that crossed through love, disbelief, and horror in less than a second. And what he said to her was almost private, as if the rest of us weren't there. And then his chair scraped back and the evening stopped being orderly. My son had gone still the way a person goes still when they understand that running is not a viable option. He was looking at the portfolio, then at me, then at the portfolio again, and I could see the precise moment when he accepted that I had known about the money, the betting accounts, the debts, the calls, all of it, for weeks. "Dad," he said. "Don't," I said. The front door opened. Bernard walked in with 2 RCMP officers and the securities agent. They were professional and efficient, and within 11 minutes, all 3 of them had been removed from my dining room. My wife said nothing to me as they brought her to the door. She looked at me once with an expression I cannot fully name, not hatred exactly, but the cold recognition of one adversary seeing another clearly for the first time. Perhaps she had always thought of me as the obstacle rather than the opponent. She was wrong about that. I stood at the window for a long time after the vehicles had gone. The inlet was dark and the city lights on the north shore lay across the water in long broken lines. I had lived in this city for 31 years. I had built something here from nothing, and the something was still standing. In January, I restructured the company's board, promoting 3 people who had been with Baines Timber since the Caribou days. People who understood the business was built on consistency, not shortcuts. I appointed a new legal counsel who was not my son. I also established a foundation at St. Paul's Hospital in Vancouver, directed toward cardiac monitoring programs for men over 60 in rural British Columbia. The men who work the resource industries, who drive 4 hours to see a specialist and often don't bother because the distance seems like too much trouble. It seemed like the right use of some of what I had built. My actual cardiologist, the one I chose myself, tells me my heart is by any clinical measure sound. I believe him. There is a version of this story where I feel diminished by what my wife and my son attempted, where the betrayal shrinks something essential in me. That version is not accurate. What it sharpened was simply this. I had spent 40 years reading contracts, reading competitors, reading the gap between what people said and what their hands were doing when they said it. I had not applied that skill at home. I had wanted badly to believe that home was different. It isn't. It is simply a room with people in it, and some of those people will show you, if you are quiet enough to watch, exactly who they are. Watch carefully.